Gotta say, this is weird.
I know. It's like, I can't believe it was a month.
Ah.
It was like only a month.
Yep. All right, hold on here. I think I'm almost live. Come on, Instagram. There we go. And here we are for an episode of Dualistic Unity Social. Just back from our California adventures. I am pumped to get this kicked off. Holy crap, did we do a lot. The retreat was one thing, but then everything that happened afterwards was entirely something else. I have learned so very much, not just about myself, because I mean, that's a different journey, but about how to stop thinking about understanding myself. Like, to let go of the concept of understanding myself, to actually get that understanding myself is an ongoing process. It's not ever something that I can understand now. It's just something I'm in the process of understanding by virtue of being here while it's happening. And so there has been such a sense of freedom and at the same time terror in the complete loss of control, the complete loss of direction, the complete loss of story. But that freedom and that terror kind of go hand in hand. And it's only terror when I stop to think about the fact that I don't know what's happening. Up until then, it's just fine. It's fun. But then I'm like, God, I don't know. And it becomes this fucking mad dash for like false certainty instead of just continuing on with the not knowing. And when I'm going through the not knowing, it's incredible. It's amazing. I'm present for every conversation. I'm present for everything that changes direction. Suddenly I'm just like, oh, we're not going there now. I'm going to go this way. There's no sense of loss or desperation or expectation or frustration. It's just the full experience of feeling everything I'm feeling from moment to moment to moment. And as long as I don't stop to try and conceptualize it, understand it, evaluate it, it's beautiful. It's heaven on earth. But as soon as I stop, as soon as I look for that control, that sense of what's happening and what it means about me, it immediately turns to hell. It's been a fascinating 2 weeks. I'm glad to be back. I'm looking forward to all of our conversations. Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello, hello. It is good to be back. Feeling feeling new in a lot of ways, like in a lot of different ways, like cut down, humbled, new, different, and like very similarly kind of feeling a back and forth between like when I'm here right now, just being here, doing whatever it is, like not trying to be myself, but just being whatever I am, like super light, and things have a way of kind of passing through, passing by. Nothing's given too much weight. But as soon as like, dude, as soon as as soon as there is the hesitation or the second thought or the like, well, where is this gonna go, or how am I doing, or trying to even I've noticed like in certain situations realizing how much of a habitual response I'll have to things, or a habitual way of doing something, and seeing that, and then not going back to it, like seeing almost this gap between the habitual thing that I typically would do and recognizing it. But then it's like it's like there's something there until I'm like, wait a second, anything, like everything could be on the table. Like to a text message, dude, like to a text, I can sit there and be like, know that there's no control, and know that like someone's going to read it in a way that I have no control over no matter what. And like not having the comfortable typical response, like when someone asks you how you're doing and just saying good, that sort of thing. But instead, I don't even know, like not doing the habitual response so much. It seems like there's so many more options and things that could be done that aren't necessarily right or wrong. And it, I guess, comes back to responsibility, but just seeing everything also as an opportunity instead of a test, like an opportunity to express where I'm at, like all this stuff. Like recently, even just the thought of having a podcast and being on a podcast, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, when did this happen? What's going on? Like, I'm expected to get onto a platform and talk for a while. Like that even became something that was like, oh, this is part of, who I am doing this stuff. And now there's like nothing like that. Like there aren't so many buoys, it feels like. And it's a totally different experience that's a lot more, again, it's like jarring, but also free. You don't have any buoys. You're not in a boat. You're in the ocean. It's like, yeah, you're free, but it's also jarring, but you're free. And it's like this back and forth where things really don't stick anymore. And I can laugh at myself. And I was editing that video or episode from the retreat that is like, oh man, excited for people to listen to that. Cause yeah, I was going through all sorts of things, and like I kick it off by saying like having a ton of fun right now. It's not to say that I wasn't, or there wasn't this appreciation, but it's so clearly in my tone that I'm like, I'm going through some stuff. And so I was laughing my ass off at it. But at the same time, it's like years ago, that would have been like the most brutal thing that I could listen to, was me like struggling to fucking even speak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, is being able to look at it and go, "Oh, wow." You know, it's kinda like I was saying about those old videos of mine, that I've played a few, on there are a couple on social media, but most of them are just on my hard drive, and it's because I look back at them and I go, "I was really going through that," you know? Problem is those videos are mostly corrupted, so half of them don't work anymore, but the thing is it was nice when they were live back when I had recorded them, because people could see I was going through it. And I had to accept that people could see I was going through it, because we almost convince ourselves that people don't see it the rest of the time. Like we get so caught up in going through it that we actually start to think that people aren't seeing that we're going through stuff anyway. And many people don't, because they're going through their own shit too. Right. But to those who are looking, to those who aren't going through things to the point where it blinds them, it's pretty obvious we're going through stuff. And that's okay to be able to accept that and go, I'm going through stuff. Because why would it matter? Right? Why would it matter how somebody perceives you going through stuff? What should matter is the going through stuff. Right? But if you judge yourself for going through stuff, then you fear the judgment of others for going through stuff. But the fact is that there's a big lesson in that accepting that we are going through stuff is really accepting that everybody's going through stuff. You know, there's an equalizer there, and it changes the conversation to a very large degree. And that's why it's so important, I think, to do this podcast and to have these conversations and do these retreats, because there is there's no show happening, right? Like you and I aren't trying to come across as spiritual gurus. I don't do the monotone fucking yoga teacher thing, right? And I swear like a drunken sailor. And the reason is because it's a conversation. The conversation is what's important. It's not, how it appears, because anybody who's looking at how it appears is not going to get anything out of the conversation. And so the conversation itself becomes its own filter. It can be appreciated by those who have the clarity to appreciate that it's not going anywhere, because they're not trying to go anywhere. And anybody who's trying to go somewhere, it means nothing. And that's the same for everything. You see, everything you do is going to be perceived one way or another according to where somebody else is trying to go or not go. Somebody who's not trying to get anywhere is going to empathize with you more often than not. Somebody who's trying to get somewhere and be something is going to judge you, because that's how they gain momentum. That's how they maintain that trajectory. And so it's great to be able to just go, right, no matter what I do, no matter what I do. And this is why it's funny, because I could go on a nice cerebral, spiritual, philosophical rant, or I could just shoot the shit and swear a little bit. And a person who's listening to it is going to resonate or reject either or, based on their own priority. There's nothing I can do that's right for everyone. There's nothing I can do that's wrong for everyone. So all I can do is just be. That's it. I can just be me. And that in itself is surprisingly challenging when you've spent a lifetime trying to figure out what to be. And so for me, that was a big part of this last 10 to 12 days, was the recognition that so much of my life, especially the last half, I've spent really just giving in, just surrendering, just going, fuck it, just be what I am, you know. And you know as well as I do, I'm goofy sometimes. Sometimes I'm super chatty. Sometimes I go internal like a motherfucker. Sometimes I'm very isolated, and I oscillate between all of these things. But I do so unapologetically because there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with being me. There's nothing wrong with going through things the way I'm going through them. I, expecting everyone to understand that is irrelevant and unreasonable. Right? It's not something I can really do. So that was it. That was my rant for the moment. I'm going to stop right there because it's okay for me to do so.
Yes, indeed it is. And the thought of like the amount of times that we're on live streaming, talking, having conversations, the retreats just being this entire open-ended situation over the course of many days, like the thought of, even now it's hitting me, like as you were talking, the thought of trying to maintain some sense of control or maintain some sense of direction. Like imagine if fucking every episode we got on, we're like, all right, here's the topic we're going to talk about. Like there's a side of that as I'm talking that's like almost feels a relief in a sense, but then there's so many more restrictions if you do that. And then it's like, well, you know, you got to research it and you got to do this and do that. And the same thing can happen. Like we can pick a topic. I could right now pick a topic and talk about it for a bit. And that's just as appropriate as anything. But the thought of like beforehand doing it. And I think that almost because I've gotten so used to it's like I've gotten used to doing that in the sense of getting on these episodes, but also maintaining like an underlying, well, yeah, but we're trying to get something across to people. Like we're trying to help, like there's a message here that, you know, that can be expressed verbally that isn't the case. And I'm coming to terms with and getting a good look at how actually the verbal expression of it can be this mask, this veil, this thing that like fucking is on the other side of the spectrum than the application, than being it, showing it. It's like on that episode where I'm clearly just like going through stuff because I had, and you know, Reno's just stuff I was dealing with and internally, and you know, I'm saying stuff like, you know, having a lot of fun right now on this episode when it's clearly like I'm going through stuff, and that's okay too. It doesn't have to be this constant like I'm having so much fun right now, but you can also, I think through that I've gotten an appreciation for like internally it can be not a ton of fun, but you can still have fun, like you can still make the most of it, like your response to what you're going through. It's not like, you know, you got to put a smile on your face and like, yeah, yippee, yaddy, daddy da. But there is, I think you go through enough fucking internal mental stuff that's like, all right, it is just, it's a focus. It's like a itch, that itch, you know, you mentioned, we talked a bit the last couple of weeks, just how it's a constant itch that you have the opportunity to scratch, and it's very similar to that. It's like it gives you that brief cessation, comes back a fuckload of a lot more itchy though. That's for sure. You do it again, itchier, itchier until it's just taken that period. You know, you have a spot that itches a lot. It's like you got to take some time to be like, I really want to itch it right now, but I'm not gonna. I'm not going to do that. And then it, you know, subsides a little bit and there's a different experience. But, you know, when you're used to just constantly itching it, it's like you can live a life that's like just constant itching and continuing to do stuff and buy things or do things to, you know, satisfy that itch instead of taking a look at the itch and being like, wow, this itch is fucking driving me everywhere. Like it's dictating my entire experience. I'll wake up in the morning, itch, then I have to itch again and itch again and itch again, and it just builds, and it's not just day to day, moment to moment. It's like experience to experience. Also, it can be like, all right, what's the next thing that I'm gonna itch? Oh, this is feeling itchy right now. I'm gonna look forward to this thing, or I don't want to focus on the itch instead of just being like, there's nothing wrong with being itchy, and I can feel itchy, and I don't have to necessarily respond. And oh shit, there's things happening right now. Oh, and it's like a willingness, a choice, taking responsibility. Like, oh, if I keep itching this thing, it's going to keep getting itchier. It's going to keep feeling bigger than it is, because it's still just an itch, but it can feel like a lot, and it can feel like, oh, it's so fucking itchy right now. I got to do so many more things to stop. And it's like, no, it's just really itchy right now, but you have the same opportunity as when it's less itchy. And I don't know, maybe as you go through stuff, there's like, the baseline itchiness shifts, or it's just, you build enough faith in yourself to not itch it. But what do I even mean? That's just like a progressive thing. It's not even something that you carry with you, like checkpoints. But I'm getting to that point where I'm like, all right, I don't know what I'm saying anymore, so I'm just gonna stop.
Awesome. Pass the baton. I want to mention to everybody who's listening right now that if you have been wrestling with the urge to itch while Andrew has been talking, this is very much the point. What is the scratching other than just settling on something? Thinking about it, going back to that evaluation of how you're doing, that thought of how the experience is going or what the experience even is. This is something that really hit me in this last week. There were so many points, and I'm still experiencing it now, and I think it's just going to be the norm from now on, because I don't know if it makes sense otherwise, actually, where I couldn't narrow down what I was feeling to any one thing. Like, every time I tried to verbalize what I was experiencing, it would fall short. It felt, hollow. It felt like it was barely communicating all of it, because as soon as I would try to describe it as what I was feeling, it would only be one facet, and then it would almost devalue the rest of the experience, and I kept coming to the point where I'm like, "Well, why the fuck am I trying to describe it instead of just experiencing it?" And so the entire time I've just been feeling, and this is what I've settled on. You can laugh at that if you'd like to. I did. A lot. I'm feeling a lot. I'm feeling a lot all the time. I could say I'm feeling me, but that's obvious and it sounds kind of suspicious depending on the context. But the point is that I'm feeling a lot all the time. And it's so easy for me to take what I'm feeling and tie it to a memory and go, that's what it is. But if I don't do that, all of a sudden the feeling changes, as does the memory that my brain tries to associate with whatever the feeling has now become. And if I just sit through it, it's like it cycles. Like the feeling changes, and with each variation of the feeling, a new memory that my brain wants to attach it to pops up with it. But if I don't attach to it, if I'm not like, that's where it's coming from, the feeling changes again. And so it's just this ongoing spiral of various different feelings and perceptions and possible attachments to the story that I'm going through all the time. But I have such a tendency of scratching that itch, of just going, it's that, right? Because otherwise, it's just got to keep happening. And if I'm not used to that, it's very overwhelming, because then I'm cycling through feelings and again, perceptions. And as those feelings shift in ways that I haven't experienced or allowed myself to experience before, they bring up perceptions I haven't seen. And a lot of those perceptions I haven't seen can be quite scary and outside of my comfort zone, right? But it's because I've allowed my feeling to shift. I've allowed myself to shift. I've allowed my perception to shift. But as soon as you see something scary or you don't understand or you don't like, what do? You grab on with both hands. You're like, something wrong. Instead of, once again, just sitting through it, letting the feeling change, letting the brain try to attach to something else and just not doing it. Right? Because until it does attach to something else, you're still totally free. But there is no certainty in that. Right? There's no, now I've hit it, because it's being in that place where all of those perceptions are going, where all of that intelligence is in action, that you are actually experiencing clarity. But it's the kind of clarity that goes with being absolutely present rather than knowing beforehand what's going to happen, which is often what we kind of think clarity is. It's like, I'm going to know how this is going to go. Whereas intelligence or clarity is really just not needing to.
Yeah, and that can feel really, really jarring in a sense, but then it's like there's a appreciation, almost like a practice, because then it's like you show up to a situation, it's like, oh, I don't know how this is gonna go. And it's like, well, yeah, that's always the case. Like, this is always where you're starting from. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm afraid of this, or it means this, or it's definitely this, or this thing that I'm feeling definitely means that. But there can be such a pull for certain things and certain feelings and experiences, and even just like being in different new situations. Like, for me, smoking regularly, like, that has been one of the most transformative things for me, and I've gotten a good look at like why people avoid it, like why people don't do it, because it brings about, like, it's really hard to maintain a specific perception of yourself if you're smoking all the time. Like, you got to be willing to just be there in the moment and be yourself and show up as yourself, which is, you know, like, the easiest and hardest thing to do if you're used to not doing it, if you're used to be in a certain way. And like, as you were talking about just like the familiar response or feelings, like, I was thinking about just how much myself, certainly included, for a lot of my life, tried to almost create repetition of days, like create a structure that, based on certain things that I would feel, I would have something throughout my day that, like, was in response to that thing. Like working out or doing this or doing the meditation, doing the this, doing that, kind of check all the boxes to cover, suppress, cover, deal with, avoid, not face, whatever, all of those sort of feelings and perceptions. And it's kind of this place that doesn't it's not that it doesn't get you anywhere, but there's a lot less opportunity for brand new thoughts or perceptions or experiences, or even ideas, being creative. Like, I never really valued creativity much at all. Like, the thought of being creative and the thought of improving yourself almost are on different ends of a spectrum, because it's a lot easier to be creative if you're not also trying to improve yourself. But if you're trying to improve yourself, it's hard to be creative. There isn't much incentive to be creative or to think about things a little bit differently, because it's just a focus on yourself becoming, something more. And so, yeah, as you don't have those familiar responses anymore, it's like the feelings, you start to see different perspectives, more perspectives that are then informative. Like, it's uncomfortable to see new perspectives, certain new perspectives, as you're going through stuff, but it very much is informative. And then once you see it, it's like you're aware of it, you can take it in, you don't have to let it weigh you down, but it's like an additional consideration that you just weren't as aware of when it was the same sort of way that you were living your life or doing things.
Yeah. And this is why conversations are so much fun, because all you can do is really arrive. You can just show up for the conversation and let it play out. And again, there's no sense of certainty there. But if you think about it, you've never really had a sense of certainty, just false certainty. Like, you can plan for every conversation, what you're going to look like, how you're going to sound. You can't control how they react. And so you still have to dance. It's just that you're planning for an expectation actually makes it harder for you to dance. So you may as well just accept the reality of uncertainty and jump in and see what happens, because that's when you'll learn. And you may not do as well as you would like to do or idealize that you could have done, but you will do as well as you could do. and then that will change into something else later. Wanted to stop for a moment and just invite everybody listening at the moment to join us in 35 minutes when we will be hosting roundtable number 33. I'm very excited about this. Wrong thingy. Hold on. I'm going to put this up on the screen so everybody can join. By joining us on Patreon as a tier 2 or a tier 3 supporter, you can join us on this roundtable. It's a lot of fun. I can't find the goddamn thingy. There it is. Aha. Boom. We record these every 2 weeks. Roundtable episodes are basically a chance for people in the community to shoot the shit with us and help record an episode. But it's also a chance for you to do exactly what I just said. Jump in. Just jump in. Just show up. Jump in. Get into the conversation, whether you think you have something to say or not. You can just show up. And if you have nothing to say, at least you showed up. And then, of course, after the fact, you're going to be like, well, I should have said something. But you showed up. So now you know you could do that. So now next time, just do that, which you already know you can do. And then do one more thing that you didn't think you could do, which was say something. And it could be simple as hi. And then after the fact, you're going to go, I should have said more than hi. But you see, now you said hi. And this is how change happens. One step at a time. One step at a time. But we want to make sure that if we're going to jump in, it's going to go exactly the way that we think it should. We want to shortcut change. We want to shortcut the process of actually understanding ourselves and what we're capable of. Because you can't really until you fail and keep going anyway. See, isn't that funny? Right? We're so scared of failure, but the reward of failing and going on is knowing that failing doesn't matter. And isn't that better than succeeding? Because that's freedom. But then we have to let go of the perception of failure. And that's what I mean by not being able to measure your progress. Because if you had 1,000 failures that led to a success, then that's just 1,000 steps to success. They are neither failures nor successes unless they define you. And if nothing defines you, then there's just the ongoing process of change and growth and being in the moment. And that is freedom. But it's freedom from your own expectation. It's freedom from your own shit. It's freedom from your own preferences and freedom from your own assumptions. It's freedom, ultimately, from the prison that you build to keep yourself feeling secure. Just jump in. And if you can, join us on a roundtable.
Yes, definitely join the roundtable if you're free today at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 6 to 7:30 p.m. Because, oh my goodness gracious, like the expectations, just self expectations, like just getting a good look at how unnecessary they are, how arbitrary they are, how much they're just very personal. Like they're super, super personal expectations, and they can tie you up so quick and keep you from jumping into new things and taking that approach where it's like, all right, you're afraid of doing something, but you did it. Okay, great. And then next time, you can do a little more and a little more. And it's interesting because I'll maintain that like the the peak sort of expectation of like showing up somewhere and just being on it at all times, or even like showing up somewhere not being afraid. Like, oh, I should be able to show up here, chill, not afraid, should be personable, blah blah blah. And it's like, motherfucker, you're like, if you're nervous about going somewhere, it's like, at least drop your expectations once you're there and be honest with like, yeah, I'm afraid. Yeah, I'm afraid to jump in. Yeah, I worry about all sorts of different things, but I still can't know. And at the very least, like something is better than nothing, like doing something is better than just avoiding things, your whole life. And I remember having this thought like a while ago when I was younger, because I went to just like different high schools, and there was like these big these big speeches. I don't think I've ever talked about this, but there were these big speeches. One was at the one school, which is a middle school thing, and I wasn't at that school, and then went to a different school. And the school I was leaving, that I was for middle school thing, had this big like speech thing for high school. And it's not to say that I haven't done like public speaking and talking and stuff and like in public, but I remember thinking like, oh, I'm kind of afraid of these things, kind of nervous about these things, and things like that have trickled through my life. Like I've avoided a lot, just like a lot of stuff, a lot of potential opportunities out of a fear. And then the last couple of years with the social media stuff, like definitely not like built a false idea, but like kind of did, and kind of like used a thought about myself to feel better. And I don't know, and I really try not to like break this down too much, but it's like there was a sense of not being afraid of jumping into certain situations, but then a fear of jumping into other situations. But it was only in ones where, I don't know, maybe there was less exposure. Whereas now the back and forth can be from like the most like basic of situations, but then in situations where I'm more exposed, it's like the fear's still there, but like I'll kind of have just a fuck it, whatever, and like, getting baked for it too. I'm like, fuck it, I'll just get super big. Like, what do I have to lose? Like, that's kind of the point that I feel like in my life in a lot of ways. Like, all right, I'm feeling more exposed. Like, what am I trying? Like, what do I have to lose at this point? It's like, what have I ever had to lose? Like, what the fuck do we ever have to lose? Going into, and especially, like where it's not a physically dangerous situation. You go into, you're trying to learn how to feed a lion at a zoo or something. It's like, yeah, reasonable hesitation for that. But when it's just, social interactions, human interactions, like there's not a physical danger to that, but it can feel like there is in a lot of ways, like feel almost more so. Like there are certain scary physical things I would rather do than some psychologically frightening things, for sure.
It's interesting because going back to what you were saying about this idea that you shouldn't be afraid, thinking you shouldn't be afraid is a fear response. Like that's trying to get away from it, right? And it's not about not feeling afraid. It's about accepting that you are, accepting that fear is there, and then moving on. But we get so caught up in the response to the fear, right, that we don't recognize that freedom from fear is not the absence of fear. It's freedom from judging ourselves from experiencing it. It's freedom from having to analyze ourselves for doing so. It's freedom from, the response to fear as something that is right or wrong, right? Simply something that's optional. Like I'm afraid in every social situation. Like I told you, I'm super oversensitive to everything, touch, sound, everything. Like all I want to do in every social situation is go to a mountaintop where I'm alone and I can see if anybody's coming, but the whole point is there's an experience on the other side of that I'll never get to if I respond to fear, if I let fear dictate it. And that includes trying to get to this place where I'm no longer afraid. That's just a fear response. It's a part of me. It's an option. It's a perception. Right? And it's just continuing on despite that. But that's that silence. That's the quiet. It's when you walk into a social situation and you can feel the urge to respond in fear. You can see all the perceptions that you could be afraid of, and you just accept, right? But there's a lot of other shit that could happen too. Right? And that's the incredible part about it. And that's what I really experienced a lot in the last week. Like we got invited to an event that at first we're like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to have an opportunity to mix and mingle with somebody that we've had on the show as a guest. Just shoot the shit with them, maybe smoke some weed, that kind of thing. And so we went down and we ended up meeting the guy in a building that had historical value. Like, it was the former house of Charlie Chaplin in Hollywood. And it had a cool ass story about a tunnel that he had built to this bar that they didn't want him to go to. And he's like, well, fuck you. I'll find another way. And there was a whole story behind it. But not only that, then we got to go to this 420 party at this location where we met all kinds of very cool people, all of which never would have happened for me at one point because I would have never made it to go and meet the guy who was on the show. Hell, I would have never made the fucking show because all of my fear would have went, you can't do that. You have nothing to offer. You have nothing of value. You're not the kind of person who talks to these people. You're not the kind of person who anybody would listen to. All that imposter syndrome shit. Like I let that dictate my life for a long time. And not doing so is leading me down these paths that I know very well I would never have experienced if not for just daring to let go and accept that I don't know. I'm not experiencing any of this because I'm like, yes, I can. I'm experiencing it because I don't fucking need to. And I'm not telling myself I can't. But all of a sudden, an opportunity shows up where it's like, hey, would you like to come to this party with such and such? And I'm just like, holy shit. And a big part of me is like, I can't do that. I can't do it. And then the other part of me is it's like, yeah, I accept that you're there. That's it. It's not about resisting it, fighting it, trying to run away from it. It's not that it shouldn't be there. There's a very good reason it's there. It's an option. It's one of many. And you'll never, ever be free of it from running from it. Just have to accept it and move on despite it. But be informed by it, just not dictated by it.
Yeah, and seeing it, it's like an option that's always like it's always on the table, and it's just one. It's just one that, yeah, like there's certain responses you can take really seriously, or just like habitual response, like, oh, I'm afraid of that, so I can't handle that, instead of, oh, I'm afraid of that, which is always an option, like judging myself, always an option, going through something and assuming that you did something wrong, always an option. Like there have been situations where, in it, I was feeling totally fine when I was in it. And it was like things were, and then afterwards, all of a sudden I get flooded with like all this self-judgment. I'm like, fuck, where did this come from? I was just like, just showing up was a big thing for me. And then it's like, I felt fine the whole time. And then afterwards, it's like, the thought of this, that, this, that, this, that, this, that. But then going into it, it was like I was petrified of even doing anything. And then looking back, it's like, oh, should have done this, could have done that. It's like, oh man, the immediacy of like trying to figure out how something went or how something did, like, because at that event, even like I had a number of conversations with different people, and like just there can be the potential to judge yourself after. And there were some people who like I thought was like whatever my own measurement, like I didn't do great or whatever, like whatever that means. It sounds so absurd saying it, but then like they messaged me after the event on Instagram saying just like, hey, it was great meeting you, like love chatting, blah blah blah. And there's no sign whatsoever of them being like, like not liking me. And I'm like, fuck, you really do, just like it's just showing up. But yeah, I can feel like, just the constant desire to know how you're doing. And it's simple to assume that you're doing everything poorly. Like it's super like it's one of the easiest things you can do. You can go have a really normal basic conversation with someone. You're like, I don't know how that went. I want to know how that went. So I'm gonna assume I fucked it all up. I did everything incorrectly, and that person hates me right now just because I want to know, just because I want to be sure of something, instead of, because like I don't know if they appreciate it, if they were thinking about themselves the whole time, if they're not thinking about anything that has to do with anything. I don't know any of it. I don't. But if I want if I want to know, then I can easily just be like, oh yeah, I fucking did terribly. That was awful. That went so poorly. And again, it's just like, I just want to think about myself. I just want to be sure of something instead of just, I don't, meh.
More importantly, you want to equate being liked with doing well.
Fuck.
Because what if all of that happened? What if the person didn't like you? What if you were perceived in a negative way? And it was exactly the springboard that person needed to find another insight. What if the need to be liked is in fact not helping? Not indicative that you're doing well at all. And that's why the events have changed for me to a large degree. And I don't just mean the retreats, I mean every event. And by event, I mean every interaction. Because I'm here for me, I'm here as me. And there's going to be times where that's not going to come across in a way that somebody really likes. A perfect example would be our interaction with a couple of lawyers at Barney's Beanery, where we were playing pool, and we were, how is that going? Basically, they were playing doubles against our two friends. That was it. And there was this giant guffaw about all the technical details. And then all of a sudden, when they didn't go the way they liked it, they're like, well, it's the 3-ball rule. It's 3-ball rule. And then they would get really like upset about it. You could see it was bothering them that the game wasn't going their way, instead of just recognizing that they were playing pool with two wonderful people. Like, they could have just laughed. And I found the whole thing kind of funny. And he's kept looking at me like, well, you get it right, man. You get it right, man. And I didn't say no. You could just tell by my attitude. I was like, whatever you think is important, man. Like, however you want to play this. Do you want this to be a regulation pool game, or do you want to be at a bar hanging out with a bunch of cool people that you could be laughing with? And he didn't like that. And of course, they ended up losing the game after that. And he came up to me and he's like, well, you seem to have an issue with me. I'm like, I don't have an issue with you at all. At all. I just think that you were taking this game a little seriously. You really think that? You really think I'm taking this game seriously? I do. I think you're taking it seriously. And you could tell it just drove him nuts, because he really wanted to argue me into believing that, no, I'm just trying to make it fun. I'm just trying to make it fair for everyone. I'm just trying to get everybody's opinion. Like it's this giant, democratic vote. It's like, it could be the easiest thing in the world. Nah, doesn't matter. You're shot. How hard is that? And you could have a totally different experience. And at that moment, that person didn't like me at all. I wasn't being offensive. I wasn't angry. I wasn't looking at them in the face going, you're a fucking dick. I was just more or less amused by the difference in priority, right? And it bothered them. Now, if I thought them liking me was the most important thing, I would have never, ever expressed what I was honestly feeling there. I would have put a happy face on it. Good job, man. It's important to follow the rules, all that. I would have pandered. I would have looked for that unifying bridge. When in fact, all I was an opportunity for that guy to have an honest to God look at the impact that he was having on people without putting the filter putting the filter there for them to be able to avoid it. That's what drove him nuts. He's like, you really think I'm taking this too seriously? Yes, I do. That was it. And I actually asked him, I'm like, don't you? And that's what sealed the deal. Because then he actually had to think about it, and nobody wants that. They want me to say, no, I don't think you're taking it too seriously at all, so they can move on and feel validated. So just be yourself. Fuck being liked. Being liked has nothing to do with being the most effective human being, with being the most present, with being the most impactful, hell, with being the most unifying. It has nothing to do with you. Just throw in. Just be there. And if you can, join the roundtable, because if I don't get your email address in the next 5 minutes, you're not going to be joining, because that's when I send out the invite. But do check out the invite on patreon.com/dualistic unity. Join the roundtable, or join us tomorrow for our free group. We have 30 seconds left. I'm going to stop talking because I can.
And I have thoughts that I'm going to save for the roundtable. But this has been a lot of fun, because that maybe we'll kick off with that need to feel like, to be liked, because that's another expectation, right there, and it's not authentic and it's not genuine. And as I was describing that, and as you responded, I'm like, oh fuck, that was so obvious that it's like that was my intention. That's been my intention. And like without that, oh my God, way less weight. All of a sudden, there's a lot less expectation of yourself, especially if that's been the way that you've lived your life. So I'm gonna stop. We can definitely continue on the roundtable, but hop in there if you can. This has been a lot of fun. Appreciate everyone for tuning in.